Hi guys! I have talked before on my channel about how much I love classics. Today I wanted to switch it up a little bit because I do read other things besides classics. I love pretty much everything, and one of the modern authors that I just love is Ellen Hopkins. I have been reading her for over 10 years. I started reading her when I was in 8th grade, I believe, and I'm 26 now, so it's been a long time that I've been reading her books. She writes a lot of like teenage, young adult type novels, and I love them. I just can't get enough of her. Even books of hers that weren't like my favorites still weren't bad. I can devour her books. I have not read all of them, but I've read almost all of them. And every time she comes out with a new book, I buy it. But if you haven't read Ellen Hopkins and you want to give her a try, I wanted to recommend some books for you. I want to recommend one book and one series of where I think is a good starting point. So if you're just looking for a standalone book to try of hers, I'm actually going to recommend the first book that I have read of hers, which was Identical. This book just grabbed me from the beginning. I couldn't put it down. All of her books are pretty chunky looking. I mean, they look huge, but she writes in free verse poetry, and so you can really fly through these books because there's not a lot of words on the pages, and her poetry is easy to understand. So if you're not into poetry, don't worry, you'll be able to read it. It is not complicated. It's not look for the hidden message in the poem. No. It reads like a story. So Identical is about these two identical twin sisters. I'm not going to say too much about the story because I don't want to spoil anything for you. But this story just gets so intense and it's fast paced, and if you're looking for something that will just blow your mind, this one is definitely a great read. I could not put it down, and the ending shocked me. Did not see it coming, and I recommend this so much. It's been a long time since I read it, but I still remember how much it affected me once I got to the end. One thing that I really have found fascinating about Ellen Hopkins is that in pretty much every single book that I've read of hers, believe every single book, she has some poems where she pulls words out. And so they're part of the poem, but you can actually read these words on their own and they still make sense. So for example, this one says, "I wish this moment could eclipse the shadows around me, always haunting me." And she does this in a lot of her books. But what is even more cool about this book, in Identical, she does this at every chapter, because every other chapter is one of the sisters. It switches back and forth. It's kind of used as like something to mirror them, to show they're the same, but they're also different, because here's one poem that's one sister, and here's the next poem that's the other sister. The words that are pulled out are the same, except the poems are different. And so it is just really genius, I think. And I've never seen any other poems like this before I read Ellen Hopkins. And it actually inspired me to try writing my own poems with the words pulled out to the side like this. And when I was in college, I did this for my thesis, and my professors hadn't ever seen poems like this either. And so it was kind of cool. But I definitely recommend Identical. It is so good. It is so good. I really should reread it. If you're not looking for a standalone book and you'd rather read a series from her, I have a recommendation for that as well. And that would be the Crank Trilogy. I have read Crank and Glass twice. I've read Fallout once, but these are all so good. Crank and Glass especially are just amazing. Fallout's good too, but these first two in the trilogy, just wow. They're about drug addiction, And Ellen actually based a lot of this on her daughter's battle with drugs. And so it's very personal and it is very well written. And again, it's all in free verse poetry. It is just so deep and raw and honest about what drug addiction can be like. And I will never stop recommending this series. It is so good. It is one of my all-time favorite trilogies. I just think you should give it a go if you have not tried this before. You won't be disappointed. I don't think you would be disappointed. So I'll talk a little bit about Crank, the first book in the trilogy. So basically this girl, Christina, goes to visit her dad. While she's with him, he's not a great guy, and he gets her involved in drugs. And then she goes back to her mom's, and she's got this problem. And it just escalates from there. And it's just such a great book. And the fact that it is based on Ellen Hopkins' own experiences with her own daughter and her battle with drugs is just so personal. And it's real. It's sad, and it's real. And you care about Christina even though she's doing really horrible, stupid, dumb things. Glass is the next book, and it's a continuation of Christina's story. And Fallout is the last book. It's not really about Christina, but it's about her family. And so that's why you could almost read these two on their own, and Fallout could almost be optional. That's why I've actually read these twice, and I've only read Fallout once. But this is still a really good book. It's just not as focused on Christina. It's focused on her family. Seriously, read these if you want to try Ellen Hopkins. Those are my recommendations on where to start with Ellen Hopkins. She has many other books that are really good too. She writes a lot of duologies, and she has a couple other standalones. So if you don't start with these, I'm sure you won't be disappointed. There's many other great books by her. She picks really tough topics to write about in her books. So I would say if you are looking for something lighthearted and easygoing, it's probably not going to be the stories for you. Ellen Hopkins is probably not going to be the author for you. Her books tend to be raw and sometimes controversial, and she picks topics that are usually pretty touchy, like drugs, and in other books she's talked about mental illness, or she's talked about religion, and she's talked about human trafficking, and she picks these really tough topics to talk about. Her books can be really rough emotionally, and I actually really like that because sometimes I feel like I need that. I need it because reality, life is pretty messy, and her books portray reality. I feel like they show that life is not all great, and there are problems in this world, and I think her books can cause a lot of discussions that really need to be happening, and I just love them. So if you love Ellen Hopkins, please tell me which books are your favorite. If you agree with where I think people should start, if you have other recommendations on where they should start, put that in the comments. And if you don't like Ellen Hopkins, tell me why. Why don't you like her? And we can talk about that too, because it's okay to not like who I like, because I probably don't like some of the authors you might like, but we're all readers. As long as we're reading, right? It's okay. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you are enjoying what I'm trying to do here on my channel, please hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next week. Thanks for talking books with me.